Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation, which is about security big data analysis. What is it really good for, and whether we can say the more the merrier. I will share my thoughts with you on the security big data analysis in general and its role in cybersecurity, including advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons. A little bit of introduction about myself and the company that I represent. I have been in the cybersecurity industry for more than 15 years by now, both in the private sector and the government sector. I used to be taking government-related roles in, or much rather public administration related roles in different institutions of the European Union and NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But in the past 5 years, I was much more diverted to the private industry. As such, I am responsible for the international business development, or I should say strategic business development of Services Plc, which is a Europe-based cybersecurity service provider. The company is completely knowledge-based, and we are active in the field of establishing controllable and predictable processes in the cyberspace. We provide proactive cybersecurity primarily for larger commercial entities, critical infrastructure, critical information infrastructure, multinational organizations and governments internationally. Our partners, our main partners are the United Nations International Telecommunication Union, European Cybersecurity Organization, the NATO Cyber Range, the Hong Kong Productivity Council, Microsoft, law enforcement, national security agencies, national certs and CSerts. You can see the logos of some of our partners here, but let me jump a little bit further. I have to express my special thanks to the Hong Kong Productivity Council, who invited me to give this speech for the IS Summit of this year. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Now, before we jump into the topics of today's discussion, let me give you a little bit of different introduction. The European Union, where my company, let's say, is the most active, there has been quite a strong regulatory processes related to how private individuals and much rather commercial entities and governments may use data and what they may use it for. This is quite interesting because cybersecurity is quite determined in establishing those predictable and controllable processes that enable sort of ethical use of data and a little bit big data in general. Why is it needed? We will discuss it in my presentation. And for that, I will also give a short overview of big data processing methods and typical areas of big data use, with some certain related security and cybersecurity problems. We will also discuss briefly cyber threat and the relation of that to risk analysis of big data. And we will also discuss a little bit how impact analysis is understood and what is that for. I will also give you a short introduction to cyber threat intelligence. In an overview format, we will mention internal and external sources, also the possibilities and limitations of use of CTI. So basically the pros and cons. We will also discuss briefly the automated log analysis with statistical features, artificial intelligence, whether these provide a feasible solution, and let's say a handy future for big data analysis to secure systems in general. But to get back to what I originally or previously mentioned about the let's say the creating the legal background for how to use big data in an ethical and in a controlled way, what we see now is that it is really, really needed. Basically, it's a must to go for, because as we are seeing soon in my presentation as well, there are huge problems to tackle. Let's move on. Let's start from the mid-decade, let's say. At around 2016, 2015, there was a new phenomenon that all of us faced. Data was considered as a new resource, or some even said that it's a kind of natural resource. It's important from two perspectives. Let's say one is that as a resource, it means that if you consider data as a new resource, that means that you are using it to a large extent. On the other hand, you are trying to monetize it. As the caption says as well, the communities, the professional communities who worked with data tried to find it, tried to extract it, were making efforts to refine it, distribute it, and finally to monetize it. Now, at that time, it was quite difficult, I mean the monetization, but it was 5 years ago approximately. Let's see what the situation is now. Now we can say that data has become a risk. What we are facing now is big data, is big data, and what we have to concentrate on is not the thing that how we can extract it more and more, but how we can protect or how we can cyber secure the outcome of those bugs that we have been working with. Now let's see the famous 6 V's of big data. Basically, big data is a collection of data from various sources, often characterized by what has become known as the 3 V's, the original 3 V's: volume, variety, and velocity. Over time, as time passed by, other V's have been added to descriptions of big data. So what we are having now is volume, variety, velocity, veracity, value, and variability. What is volume? Volume is basically the amount of data from myriads of sources. So what we are having now is really, really extensive. It's a huge volume that we work with. Variety is the next issue. There are so many types of data that are really, really difficult to oversee even, but we are trying to set up 3 categories. Basically, we have structured data, we have semi-structured data, and unstructured data. Okay, velocity. Velocity is basically the speed, the high speed at which big data is generated. Now, with the growing of the computing capacity in general, this speed, this velocity is growing exponentially. Next V is the veracity. It's actually the degree to which big data can be trusted. Now, it's a question that may be actually, or a discussion topic that may actually be a topic of a different presentation or a separate presentation by itself. The 5th area to discuss is actually the value of big data. For many, it's actually the most important one, because as I said, data is already a monetizable issue or a monetizable asset. So basically, we consider value, the business value or the financial value, even the financial value of the data that is collected and analyzed. And the last V is the variability. It's actually the way in which big data can be used and formatted. Okay, so basically, when you enter the field of big data analysis, you are provided a basic view. These are the benefits and the advantages of why we are using big data, why we are collecting that many data, why we are using it, and why we are analyzing it. So what are the potential outcomes, positive outcomes of using big data in general? The first is cost optimization. And when I say this, I say this usually from large organizations, commercial organizations perspective. So these are basically the business benefits of using big data. So first is cost optimization. I believe it speaks for itself, because there are, by the analysis of big data, you can actually find those processes, and you can optimize your business processes further, which immediately result in cost optimization. The second one, improving efficiency, belongs to this one. By the analysis of big data, you can improve the efficiency of processes, your business processes, I mean. The third area that we usually consider as a basis is foster competitive pricing. It also speaks for itself. Next one is a little bit to user experience and customer experience area. It's usually, big data analysis is usually used for boosting sales. It also, as a next large domain or large area, it also used for creating innovations on the basis of analysis of the big data that we have from behavior, system behavior, and user behavior, for example, from business perspective, may lead us to the next steps of innovation. There are some side areas like focus on local environment, which may be important for certain communities. But what leads us a little bit already to cybersecurity is the controlling and monitoring capability, what we can strive from it. And that can be used also to manage online reputation. Meanwhile, in cybersecurity, there are some completely different events that we also have to mention when it comes to big data. Yes, there is a typo on the slide, and I'm mentioning it because it's very important. On February the 2nd, this year, not last year, so not in 2020, but in 2021, there was a new data breach published and also discussed. It just went viral very fast, and it is called. It is mentioned as compilation of many breaches. So it's the COMB or COM data breach, and the size of the breach is 3.8 billion individual data records. So this is what we consider as one perfect example of big data compromise from cybersecurity perspective. A little bit of information to you, just to give you a sort of flavor of how important it is. The number of records that were breached in relation to Hungary, my home country, is 5 million. This means 5 million individual data records breached, and many of them, the vast majority of them, are related to government usernames. So those usernames and password combinations that are used in government systems. And the other large area that is quite widely affected is healthcare in Hungary, for example, and a little bit critical infrastructure as well. Now in Hong Kong, we found 1.7 million records. The main target, for example, in Hong Kong of this data breach is the education sector. And one side note here, the .com domain records that are used from Hong Kong are not counted here. So these are the ones solely that end with .hk. So this is what is considered big data, for example, in cybersecurity. What is big data security? Let's move back to the field of definitions a little. This is considered as processing of guarding data and analytic processes, both in the cloud and on-premise, from any number of factors that could compromise their confidentiality. Let's move on. Now we have the 6 stages that we need to understand when it comes to data processing. Okay, the 6 basic stages of data processing. The first one is the data collection. The second step is the preparation on the basis of the collected data. Then we have the data input phase, then the processing phase, the data output and data interpretation phase, and then we usually store the data that is interpreted. So these are the basic steps. And this is the evolution of analysis. So what is happening? Let's go through of what we should actually do. The first step is basically the reporting phase. So when it comes to a cybersecurity breach or a big data related breach, what we first do is basically the initial step of reporting, which covers the issue actually of what happened. The second step in the process of analysis is a descriptive analysis, when we try to figure out, or security big data analysts try to figure out why it actually happened. The third phase is of monitoring, when dashboards and scorecards are provided to actually visualize what is happening at that moment or what was happening at the time of the data breach. The next step is the predictive analytics step of, so this is quite interesting, and this is what is usually, or what should be still enhanced at many situations when we actually analyze data, and also the method of it needs to be developed further, because what is happening at the predictive analytics phase is that on the basis of past and, let's say, present or almost real-time data analysis, artificial intelligence-based algorithms and machine learning-based algorithms are actually used to predict, to try to forecast what may happen in the near future. And the next step, the final step, is prescriptive analysis, which tries to describe how it will actually happen. So predictive analysis targets the what, and prescriptive analysis targets how to, or how will it happen. A little bit of insight into how we use artificial intelligence and predictive analysis in this area. The security for using big data is let's say, is of 4 step-by-step areas. First is when data is generated. Data should be structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. So these are the categories that we use now. And then when it's generated and structured somehow or put into these categories, then the next phase that comes is data storage. This is the phase when we have to store our data in a way that it could be accessible. Now, this is the basically the area. These two areas are the ones that we consider as big data. And the second two phases, the data processing and the creating actionable insight, is already the one that we consider as part of artificial intelligence. Now, what is data processing from this perspective? Is processing of data that uses those counting capabilities and artificial intelligence algorithms that are able to detect certain patterns in that data park that we are analyzing. And the last phase, the actionable insight, is that area or that phase when we try to create predictive signals, and when we try to somehow formulate our professional opinion on how is that actually happening. So this is what we consider as the most important 4 steps of cybersecurity on big data. Now, how do these all support cybersecurity in general, and how do these all support the cybersecurity of big data? On this slide, what you actually see is the 5 basic domains of cybersecurity and cyber defense. So these are overlapping areas from this perspective. The first area that we usually identify is the preventive or proactive security. The second one is the managed security services. The third one is the domain of incident response. Number 4 is the domain of mitigation, impact mitigation. And number 5 is the domain of information exchange. Now, let me be frank and straightforward. No matter what organizations, commercial or public, doesn't matter. So no matter what organizations actually communicate about themselves, what usually is missing, or what usually are missing, are those capabilities that are printed in red, and those which are printed in white are usually the ones that we consider as existing capabilities, or almost existing, or like to a certain extent existing capabilities. Now, why is that important? The ones that are printed in red can be very easily correlated to the need of analysis of big data. Why am I saying that? I'm trying to give you a handy example for that. Let's take the preventive or proactive security domain, that pie chart. You see awareness, ethical hacking, gamification, and cyber exercises as those subdomains that we consider as existing capabilities, which means that many organizations, many commercial entities actually have run and run very well developed cybersecurity awareness campaigns. They complete ethical hacking processes like vulnerability assessments and pen testing, but vulnerability assessment belongs to the managed security services, or may belong to managed security services as well. They use gamification. Organizations usually use for awareness and also use gamification for cyber drills and cyber exercises. So these are the ones that we consider existing capabilities. And for these, we don't really use big data. But for applied intelligence, or one step backward, cyber threat intelligence, there is a huge room to actually use big data as a source of analysis, and on which basis we can actually predict what cyber threat intelligence, and much rather what applied intelligence findings we may have. Just think about the IOCs and IOAs, how we get those, how we extract those, and how we correlate additional data to move on in the related cyber threat intelligence processes. A little bit of insight, as I mentioned previously, to preventive or proactive security in relation to cyber threat intel. Now, these are the domains and the potential activities where we can actually use big data analysis and security big data analysis to the benefit of the subdomain. When it comes to applied intelligence, the outcome of security big data analysis obviously may be channeled into those reports that we issue on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis, so on a regular basis. We provide ad hoc reports, or we may provide ad hoc reports. And also, if you go one layer deeper, then it comes to the definition of IOCs and IOAs. Now, it's also true for situational awareness, for ethical hacking and gamification, cyber exercises, as it was already mentioned. But the most important domain where we extensively use cybersecurity, or let's say security big data analysis, is basically the applied intelligence and cyber threat intel. Next one, in managed security services, let me just drive you back to the pie chart and show you where we are. So this is the one what we are talking about. In managed security services, what means actually security, providing security as a service, the mostly existing capabilities are the monitoring and the log management in general, and incident management, vulnerability management, but most particularly APT, the Advanced Persistent Threat, and zero-day vulnerability management are the ones of which security big data analysis benefit the most from, or quite the opposite. So those are the areas which benefit from cybersecurity big data analysis the most of. Yes, that was the one. Incident response, the next area that we should definitely consider when it comes to the use of big data analysis and security big data analysis, is incident investigation. So basically any kind of investigation processes, very important, IOC related cyber threat intelligence analysis, ad hoc reports, IOC definitions, IOA definitions, any kind of computer and network forensics. Additionally, any areas of malware analysis benefit a lot of big data analysis. When it comes to mitigation processing with cyber threat intelligence, this is also an area where security big data analysis helps a lot, especially when it comes to the risk and impact analysis area. Cyber threat intelligence-based risk and business impact analysis benefits a lot from security big data analysis. Information exchange was already mentioned, so I'm not going into details about it. And there are two more slides, let's say two more thoughts that I would like to communicate to you as a sort of summary or conclusion or takeaway from this half-an-hour discussion, is basically the levels of information and data evolution. Now, why am I saying that? Basically, what we are discussing now is data. But with the with the use of data, basically with the collection and then storage, analysis, and analysis further, what we can achieve is actually creating information of the huge data works that we have collected. So what I probably think the most important, or believe the most important, is that what we can achieve with the help of security big data analysis is creating information, actionable information, additional, and based on that additional knowledge of our digital world that surrounds us. And as a final thought, there are some missing standpoints what we have as a further aim that we need to achieve in the upcoming couple of years in relation to data analysis, big data analysis, and security big data analysis, is basically an efficient way of cataloging data. On that basis, the knowledge of all assets that we have in our systems and that we have to protect, the information of all the vulnerabilities of our assets that we use, and so a kind of very well developed professional knowledge, a business knowledge of all the processes that we have to protect and that we have to cyber secure. So that was basically all I wanted to mention today. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.